Hello everybody, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today I want to do a video on my palette and some paint recommendations, or something to keep in mind when you're looking for paints and pigments. First and foremost, let's talk about my palette. This is what they refer to as a butcher tray or a butcher palette. You can find this, I found one of these, and they're like an enamel at Michael's Arts and Crafts, and I believe I found it on Jerry's Artorama. You can also find them in other locations, probably on Blick and Amazon. However, you want to see if it's enamel or plastic. People I know that follow this style of painting will use either or. I have only used the enamel. It just has worked the best for me. There was really no need for me to change it at all. Now, with this one, I like it because my work area, I could just dip my paper towel or rag right into my water and then scrub back and clean off my mixing surface. Okay, so that's one of the nice things about this palette, is that I can clean my area off if I need to. Another thing about it is it's raised in the center, and paint and water will go towards the sides. So if you look at the lemon yellow, for example, you see how it pools back here, or the light red oxide, how it pooled back there. So that's a nice aspect of it. It just helps everything stay away from the middle, and I can clean the middle very easily. Now, palette layout. With this, my main paints, and people were asking about this, what I was using. This is my raw sienna, burnt sienna, burnt umber, Venetian red, alizarin crimson, light red oxide. I believe this is lavender. This is kind of just a test area that I'll put something out in. This is my lemon yellow. This is most likely yellow ochre, like another test area. Sap green, Payne's gray, ultramarine, phthalo blue, cerulean. I believe this is vermilion. Every once in a blue moon, I'll add a little bit of vermilion. I'll mix that with the raw sienna if I need to. The main components that I really focus on and use are what's called the Ranson palette, which is the raw sienna, the burnt sienna, burnt umber, alizarin crimson, light red oxide, lemon yellow, ultramarine, and Payne's gray. It's a very basic, easy palette to work with. Less is more when it comes to beginning watercolor painting. Having less options means that you struggle less choosing what you need to use. If you have 4 different greens on a palette, that might make you think, okay, do I use the phthalo? Do I use viridian? Do I use this, that? But with this, you could just mix the lemon yellow and the ultramarine and get your green going. So that's kind of the idea of the palette itself. Like I said, other areas were kind of just experimental stuff. So that's my setup. One thing that's good about this, I can take my little mini mister or a spray bottle, and I can spray before I start painting to kind of get them all activated. Or if I'm running low on a pigment, there's some pigments that I add every time that I start painting. For example, like ultramarine usually comes down every single time. Raw sienna too, that comes out a lot. So I work from a mixture of re-wetted with the spray bottle or fresh paint like that. Now, the nice thing about the rag as well with these paints is lemon yellow for me turns green very quickly if you even look at it. So if I need to take it and pass over the top of it with a rag, I could kind of clean it up some. For example, the other day I think I got a little bit of white gouache on my burnt sienna. So if I needed to, I could just wipe that off right there. So that's my palette setup. I want to talk about paints and tubes for a moment. I mainly have Cotman brand, Van Gogh brand, and Da Vinci brand. With paints, there's a few things that I'm going to kind of give advice on, and some of them might be old wives' tales or myths, so I'm really not too sure about that. First of all, earth tones. Burnt sienna, raw sienna, burnt umber, they're usually the cheapest of the different brands and all that. And I read somewhere, it may have been handprint.com. That's a good website to check out if you want to know more than enough about pigment. I believe places like that had recommended staying within the same brand for your earth tones, that they develop them in relationship to each other. Meaning that another company's burnt sienna might seem a little different, but then they might make their raw sienna a little different in order to work with that burnt sienna. Another thing to look for is light fastness. With Cotman, they talk about permanence on it, and on the Van Gogh brand, let me bring it close to the camera so you can see. It has these 3 pluses. That means excellent light fastness according to their light fastness chart. And does Da Vinci have it on the tube? Let's see. Light fastness, excellent. You want to look for excellent or very good. And what light fastness is when you display your painting, it can fade over time due to UV light, etc., atmospheric effects. So you want to look for good to excellent. One that has an issue, a very popular pigment that had an issue, was a alizarin crimson. So whenever you buy a alizarin crimson, you usually want to buy the xeiyu for it, the synthetic. That one has the good light fastness. If a brand doesn't have light fastness information, it seems like it's a good general rule of thumb to just stay away from that company. All 3 of these had it on their tubes, but if you go online and you say Da Vinci watercolor chart or the Van Gogh pigment chart, they'll have a list of all their colors, and they'll have a key and information and tell you which one is light fast and which one isn't. So that's another thing to keep in mind. I just kind of prefer to work with things that are more permanent, just to play things on the safe side. Another thing to look for is the pigment themselves. Here, light red oxide is PR101. That's the Cotman, and it's a light red oxide. If I look at my Van Gogh brand light red, it's PR101. It's the exact same pigment that's being used. So when you're looking across brands, they might have different names for different things, but if you look at the pigment, that's where the real information lies. So they might call something Sunshine Happy Day Yellow, and another company might call it Lemon Yellow. But if you look at the pigment information, you can then compare and say, okay, is this brand the same as the other pigment-wise? Sometimes, and I think, hey, my sap green tube is just, you can tell I need to get another tube. Let's see if I can kind of get it opened up to see the pigment. Okay, some will have a mixture of pigments. This has PG7 and PY42. So I think that's phthalo green, and PY42 says iron oxide. It might be some type of yellow in it. Some people will talk about having single colored pigments and try to stay within that, because if I mix this green with this red, There's the idea that maybe that yellow might interact a certain way with it, the yellow that's in this tube, part of it, and then that green aspect might interact with it, and you start getting more pigments being mixed. That's the argument that I've seen online about that. I haven't really experienced that yet because I'm not like a top of the line professional realist painter or anything like that, or that in depth with it, so I don't know if that's true or not, but it's something to keep in mind and something that you will read about when you look into pigments. One last thing, and I have an example here. See, when I first started collecting pigments, and paints, I'd go to Hobby Lobby and I'd use that 40% off coupon code because they had the Winsor & Newton, kind of the professional line. Cotman is their student line. And if you look at student versus professional or artist grade, some brands, and I don't know if they're Cotman, sepia, or sepia is the same, some might have more pigment concentration in it, or it might have a more pure pigment. The student line might be a synthetic or a mixture of pigments in order to achieve the color, while the professional line may not. So that's something to watch out for as well. Ultimately, at the end of the day, student versus artist pigments, a lot of people will talk about that online. There's kind of a difference between the no-name student brand beginner watercolors that don't have any pigment information and Cotman and Van Gogh. There's a difference between those. There's a lot of professionals out there that use Cotman and Van Gogh, even though these are called a student line. From what they say with Cotman, I believe for the most part it's just not as concentrated pigment as their more expensive brand. And Van Gogh, that's, I think the artist line is called Rembrandt. But these Van Goghs have been serving me great, and they're really good. So if you're just looking to get started, I would look at Cotman, Van Gogh. I would look at the price per ounce. The way you can do that is just take the price and divide it by the number of ounces in the tube, and that'll let you compare the two. I love Da Vinci brand, and I found that price-wise, price per tube, especially with my more basic colors that I utilize, the price per ounce was very similar to the student line, even though they call these per artist line. So I think overall that's all the information to get y'all started. I hope I didn't overwhelm you. Just to recap, simple butcher tray. We talked about the colors. We talked about the layout. I didn't really talk about any mixtures. I could do a video down the line if you're wondering about how I do that. We talked about a basic Ranson palette is what we kind of call this mixture. There are some other colors that people add in, or that he added in at times. We talked about lightfastness, which for me is super important. We talked about being able to compare pigments across brands. We also talked about prices and the difference between student and artist. If you have any questions or anything like that, let me know down below. If I didn't make anything clear, I can redo the video, and if there's anything you want me to address, let me know. All right, I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great day.